notifications. Hello, world.
And of the Cave Bear. That's what we're reading next.
Clan of the Cave Bear is always, 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 always the best pick.
Let's see. The date today? Yeah, that one wouldn't come
The
in
date
time.
today is today. Oh, you'll get a kick out of this, especially for those of you who are here early. Whenever one of my kids says something along the lines of, "Oh, I forgot what I was gonna say," I will regularly tell them like, "I don't know, you didn't tell me," and they always, "Dad."
That is some serious dad energy right
It is
there.
some solid dad energy. It's a good one.
Oh wait, I should pull up the
Oh, I didn't fill my water.
the YouTube.
Listening as you go for a walk this evening. This evening?
Wait, what?
Help me out. Where are you, Steven? I thought you were in the States. I got you mixed up with somebody.
That's got to be London.
Denmark? Denmark. That's my vote.
Mm. Oh wait, there's the one
UK.
that's live right now.
We
Okay, I gotta
we
mute
had the right
that one.
continent.
I was almost right. Almost. Not really.
You were almost correct.
I was correct-ish. Ka-chunk.
Ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk. Do you like this?
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
You probably can't see this. You won't see this because I'm doing it for them first. This
Nope.
bookmark. I'll do this for you now.
Oh, I see it.
I don't know how crazy my camera is. My wife's getting ready to make these and make them available for sale,
Nice.
which will be fun.
I like them.
I don't
You should
know.
make a bookworm one.
I don't know what text she's gonna. I suppose I could have her put Bookworm on them. I should get her like a Bookworm brand that's got the Bookworm logo thing on it,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Yes,
sells them.
I concur.
Do you think that should happen? Like legitimately? I'll totally buy the iron for that.
I would buy some.
Some
I mean, we
like
wouldn't.
multiple.
We wouldn't. Yes, not 10,000 like last time.
Why not, Mike? That's a lot of leather. That is a ton of leather.
That's a lot of paper.
Oh my. I can already tell it's going to get hot in this room if I don't take this vest off. Take it off. I feel like I have to do this about every time we record. Soon, I will not have to wear a vest.
For sure. Oh, hold on.
Oh, hold on.
I'm getting a million screen time requests from Toby so he can join us live.
I think that's a valid use of overage.
Yes.
I don't get it, Steven. What is to the right of Wisconsin? NI? Is that supposed to be
UK.
Michigan? Huh?
The UK.
The UK? I just don't get what the NI part is. Maybe that's a typo thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Did you get a new lens? What'd you change?
So this isn't the Black Magic. This is the old Canon 70D, which I put right above my monitor basically because I recognize for basically Bookworm specifically, I'm never looking at the camera because I got to turn like this.
Yep.
And I got to see my screen, which has the outline and my mind map, and I got to take notes. So I figured this would be better for Bookworm.
Wow, so you have a camera set up specifically for Bookworm. I'm impressed.
Well, it's turning into a webcam, but yeah.
It's fair.
So this is the one that I use most of the time now.
Yeah, that's what I do. So I have the Sony that I use is there, and it's always weird because I know the camera I use for you is over here.
Yep.
So you're like stuck looking at this, but the rest of the world gets to see me look at them. So
Yes, I figured this would be better.
I played around with trying to get this camera to go both places at once so that I could send it to you as well. And I haven't quite nailed it down because I can either set it up over there on that computer, on the encoder computer, and let it run there, or I have to like try to get it back off of that over here, or I can try to split it, but then it has a delay and it's weird. So,
no bueno.
first world problems.
Indeed. Oh my goodness, this mind map is ridiculous.
You know what I did for my notes? My personal notes for this?
What'd you do?
I took a picture of the table of contents and had it convert it to text and dropped it in.
Oh, that's smart. I should have done that.
Because Joe is what we call
But
super
I
lazy.
didn't. Okay, so hold on a second.
One.
I just exported this as a PDF. I'm gonna share this live.
Like,
all right, here you go. Live people.
In the
There's
chat.
the mind map.
Chatty chat.
That's what you get, plus an editable version for every book we read if you join the club.
No pressure.
I almost bailed on this
Holy
a
buckets,
dozen
dude.
different times because this book was so long.
This is, wow. I'm a bit speechless right now.
Yeah, so normally they're not.
I mean, it's so large that it's whenever I pulled it up, it's at 12% zoom level.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whoa.
Yeah, you get your money's worth with this one.
How? Okay, I have to ask. How do you do this when we're recording? This is like inside baseball. Do you just have this
normally,
up and just navigate your way through it?
Yeah, I've got Basecamp open on the right, and then this to the left of that, and then this is my points, and so I'll grab like the sub bullets and kind of riff off of those as we're going through and talking about things.
Yeah.
But I also know the general outline and the flow of this, and it goes clockwise basically from the upper right. And there is like no way to know where you are in this outline because it's so ginormous.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
So if I get lost and I'm stumbling on my words, it's because I don't know where to go in this document.
Huh.
But that's a little extra inside baseball that no one
I gotta
cares
quit
about.
playing around with your mind node thing. Wow. Just wow.
Oh, you distracted me from what I was really doing, which was looking through my books that I ordered recently to see what I was gonna.
Oh, that's right. You were still
pick
picking
next.
That's
so
right.
many good ones.
I actually, you'll be proud of me, Mike. And I don't know if this is gonna come up. This might come up.
Uh-oh.
Let's see.
What were the?
Yeah, it'll probably come up. Your newsletter.
Okay.
The pivot newsletter that you did. I actually have a quote out of your newsletter that I dropped into my notes for the book because you mentioned the book and stuff.
Nice.
So, yes, super fun. Also,
I know what book. I know what book we should read next.
Huh.
There's an updated version of How to Take Smart Notes. Just kidding. By the way, the cover is the you remember the text on the spine?
I would do it if you wanted to.
Upside down. Still upside down.
I would do it if you wanted to, okay?
Yeah.
At this point, it might be better for me. Like, I feel like I would have a better perspective of it now than if I hadn't gotten into some things.
Yeah, there's a new version.
But my heart rate just elevated a little bit when you said that.
Yep. Yeah, I know. And I just paging through it doesn't look all that different. Man, there's so many.
Oh, I gotta put
There's so many that I've just bought that I want to go through, and I'm having trouble picking one. Although the one that stands out to me that just got released would be the new Joshua Becker book.
Oh,
Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah.
Things That Matter?
I know we got the PR thing on it. But outside of that, I don't know much about it.
Haven't done anything with it yet, but that might be like the book to read from Joshua Becker is kind of my thought. But there's also a new version, a true update of the 21 Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell that I want to cover with you at some point.
Okay.
It's coming out May 31st, I think. So unlike most other updates like GTD, where basically just pulled all the references because they were out of date,
Yep.
John Maxwell actually updated all of the stories and found relevant examples.
It was a real deal.
Yes.
Nice. Nice.
So, or how to be perfect, the correct answer to every moral question. That sounds interesting.
Puzzler says the coaching habit.
Puzzler can walk downstairs and read that book himself.
So good. So good.
Actually, you know what? I think I got it.
Think you got it.
I think I got it.
Also, did you update the thing?
Did I update what thing?
The outline. At one point, it was showing me.
Yep, I
stuff
did.
that wasn't actually. There it goes.
I think your saved version should have stuff on there now.
Yeah. I
but
pulled it up
not-
earlier, but it didn't.
Yeah, I've got it open and I'm editing it as we go for
Oh, you did put that
Chapters
little random
and-
quote thing in there. Okay.
whatnot. Yeah, I don't know if that's exactly where that fits because I didn't write down page numbers for my stuff. But
I can find out. Before we start here. What's the one before it? Oh, the first
You
one
know
in
what?
that section I wrote down too.
I'm just going to pick that Joshua Becker book. I think it looks great.
Where is this?
Also got an advanced copy of Tiago Forte's book.
You did. I was debating picking that one up as well.
We should definitely talk about that one when it's officially out.
Okay.
It's available for pre-order on Amazon. For people who are wondering what we're talking about, it's Building a Second Brain. There's actually a book coming.
You got it in the right spot. The quote thingy.
Okay, cool.
I think. Now I'm second guessing what I just said. No, it's right. No, it's wrong.
Sapiens.
It's off
Get
by
that
one.
trash out of here, Martin McGowan.
You know that that's gonna keep coming up until. Hey, you need. Okay.
I
yeah.
would pick it just so I'd never have to hear about it again, but I don't think it'll actually be a good episode. So
Maybe at some point, when time allows, we should do like extra bonus live streams between the standard
yes,
and do the books that
yes.
we don't really think we're gonna like.
We should do some sort of Kickstarter, and that would be the stretch goal is Mike reads Sapiens.
Or we just have the Bookworm roast section and we pick books that we know we're going to hate.
That's true.
But that
That could work too.
spreading negativity in the world. I can't edit this document because you have it locked. Can you move the thing down one item?
What? I have to save a new version. What are you talking about?
I can't edit it because it says you have it locked for editing.
Well, right, because I always turn it into edit mode when I start.
It's fine.
When we start an episode. So there, I saved it. You can do what you need now.
Okay.
By the way, Basecamp, really dumb that you can't both edit at the same time. I feel like
It's-
this is table stakes for a web app now.
It's actually, why did that do that?
Just let me know when I can edit again.
Sorry, I gotta get this done. Okay, now I'm good.
Okay.
I think I understand what they're trying to do. They're attempting to make this to where people have to stop and think and not try to work on too many things at one time. I think there's something around that mindset that's out there with them, but
Mm-hmm.
it's still very frustrating. It's actually becoming a thing where I feel like I want to edit this sometimes while we're recording as well, and have had some thoughts on ways for me and possibly you to grab the links for show notes as we're recording. Like
That would be
I've
helpful.
had some thoughts around that, but we can't do that when we're on base camp. No matter
Well,
how we come at
I'm
it.
ready to leave base camp, to be honest.
So,
I
yes.
give you power to find a better solution.
I don't know how to use text files to do that yet. There's got to be a way. There's okay. To the chat, because surely somebody knows this more than me. Martin, I know you maybe know. Maybe Steven does too. I don't know. But what collaborative writing tool lets multiple people edit a text file at the same time?
Rome research.
That is not a text file.
That's true.
It does not qualify.
They had just added that when I walked away from it.
Is there a way to just have like a raw text file in iCloud and then do live editing on that? I know you can do it with like pages and such, but
probably.
I don't know.
So put like a file in your Obsidian vault and then share that with the other person.
Or we create like a Bookworm vault that's shared between us.
Yeah, I don't think that's truly live though. That would cause a whole bunch of conflict, copy conflict stuff.
Google Docs.
Yeah, that's the easy answer. The unfortunate easy answer.
Somebody I'm
Anyways.
sure would say Notion, but I have had like nothing but problems with Notion.
Yeah, we could use Notion and then we could spend the rest of our lives trying to find stuff in search.
There are things that I know are in Notion and I cannot find them. Like I even know where they are and I can't get to them, and it's painful and it hurts. It's not fair.
Yep.
I don't know why people like this tool.
Well, I am not one of those people, but
which is why I can say it like that. Okay.
Should we record a podcast?
I think we should, because we're going to devolve into something here.
I don't really have a good kickoff, though, because we have no follow-up. You have anything you want to plug at the beginning?
I'm moving my video courses to YouTube as we speak. They started releasing last night.
Oh, nice.
Every day there's a video going out.
Talk about that. Talk about YouTube.
The tubes you.
I'm learning lots about YouTube.
I know you are. You're like super excited about it.
Oh, I shot B-roll the other day.
Is that fun?
It was awesome.
It's
and then I thought I messed it all up because we freehanded everything.
Oh.
But Final Cut has amazing stabilization tools.
Yeah.
So it's all good.
Yeah, use the stabilization, record in the highest frame rate you possibly can so you can slow it down.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
We didn't do that.
So if you can get it into like 120 or more frames a second, always record in the highest you possibly can, because then you can slow it down and it gives it a better cinematic effect. Puzzler told you.
I'm going to have to block the puzzler. It's getting sassy.
Yeah, anytime it's B-roll, highest resolution and highest frame rate you can tolerate. So you can always punch in and slow it down.
All right, I'm not sure the 5D Mark III does high frame rate, but
the 6400 will do, what is it, 4K 60 in recording?
Yeah, 6400 is the one that everybody says to buy, but I
Yeah.
didn't buy that. I bought the Blackmagic, which I never want to move again because it's permanently set up right here.
Yep.
Maybe I'll buy another Blackmagic. I don't know.
Don't know.
Anyways, podcast,
Okay.
YouTube.
All right, things. All right, tell me when you're ready.
All right. I think we can count on. I'm not even going to try audio hijack this time. I'm just going to assume it's not going to work.
Even on the new one? You still have issues with the new one?
Yeah, I don't remember last time.
Oh, that's right.
I mean, I could try it again, but all right, fine. Joe, just for you.
Hardware.
I'll try it.
Hardware,
I'll
my
try
friend.
it again. I've also got hardware. So here we go. Bookworm recording. Let me just run this right now. See what happens. Check. Can you hear me still?
Yeah.
I lost you. I'm not sure what's
Oh,
going on. That is probably my fault.
okay.
Let's see, default system output. That's probably why. Let's try
See,
that.
even Steven's
I got you now. I got you now.
okay. Steven thinks you're gonna have issues.
That is possible. Check, check, check.
I might be
I'm
putting those
recording.
words in his mouth.
Okay, let's try this. Kill left. Talk again.
Hi, Mike. Nothing.
I I don't know why, but I think it's working this time.
You know it's bad when you get excited because it works and it doesn't, and it's not supposed to, and you're wondering why.
Talk one more time.
I am talking one more time. I'm going to speak some words so that you can figure out if Audio Hijack is doing its job
Okay.
or if it
Yeah,
has failed.
it's working. It's working. We'll run with this.
Okay,
Thanks, Audio Hijack. Ready?
sure. I'm good whenever you are.
3, 2, 1. So, live listeners last time know that I had some serious issues with Audio Hijack, which seem to have magically sorted themselves right before we hopped on this call. So that's great.
Yeah, I really was expecting you to have all sorts of issues, Mike, and yet it worked. Scary. Now what do we do?
Now we record a podcast, I guess.
Okay, I'm game.
Before we do that, let's talk about YouTube.
YouTube.
So I've been going through Part-Time YouTuber Academy, and it's awesome. Learning all sorts of stuff, shooting all sorts of B-roll. But I understand you have done some stuff with YouTube too.
Yeah, I'm taking a step out there and doing something that is borderline scary in the world of like content creator land, and that is that I'm taking the video courses that I've created and sold in the past and making them free and putting them on YouTube. So, as we're recording this, the first of, if you followed me, you know that I've got two versions of working with OmniFocus. And there's one that was recorded in 2016, which is fairly extensive. But right now I'm in the middle of releasing one video a day from the 2019 version of that, which shockingly, there's a lot of that video course that remains relevant in OmniFocus land. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I know there's a ton of it that is still almost picture perfect for what is in OmniFocus today. So if that's of interest to you, you can check out my YouTube channel, and you'll see those videos releasing one every day. So I guess by the time this releases, that almost that entire course will be up by the time this releases.
Wow.
There you go. Super fun.
Yeah.
Super scary.
I'm on the test flight for the new version of OmniFocus.
Yeah.
But it has been taking forever to
Yeah.
come out.
Yeah.
It's a pretty ambitious rewrite, but in terms of functionality, it's, I don't know. I mean, I don't use it daily, so it's not fair for me to say there's nothing new there, but it's not, it's gonna be a lot of like behind the scenes, under the hood type stuff is my understanding.
Sure.
So it kind of sets it up for from a technical perspective for future success. But if you're expecting a complete revamp of the entire OmniFocus system, that's not what you're going to get.
Yeah, I think
no Kanban boards, to my knowledge.
I think there was way back at one point they talked about having the ability to share projects and work on them collaboratively, and that never came to fruition. And I feel like that's the one that I continue to see people talk about, but it's not there yet. Is what it is. Anyway, if you're interested in that course that I put together, you can go check out YouTube. Super fun.
We will definitely link to that in the show notes. I mentioned the Part-Time YouTuber Academy. I've also been doing a bunch of stuff behind the scenes to make more YouTube videos. I think I committed to the time this one goes live that there would be at least one new non-sermon sketch note video as a distant action item follow-up here.
Uh-huh.
So I've got a little over a week to get that out, and all the pieces are in place to do that. It'll be pretty close, but I think I can still do that.
So at this point, can you tell us what it's about? Because if you're gonna commit to this, you could tell us what it's about because it will have released.
That's a good point. I have a bunch of ideas. I haven't decided which one to film yet. Probably need to do that like
In
tomorrow.
the next three
But
seconds.
no, I can't tell you what it's about yet because I haven't decided.
Okay.
But I have lots of ideas. I've been doing lots of writing. I just started the Ship 30 for 30 course
Yeah.
as Part-Time YouTuber Academy is wrapping up. I've also signed up for another course which overlaps it by a week.
Perfect.
So I'm busy. And then after that, I signed up for another course. Are you familiar with Pencil Pirates?
No. What is Pencil Pirates?
I believe the website is pencil-pirates.com, but it is essentially a course on sketching your ideas to communicate more effectively. It looks a lot, the website anyways, looks a lot like sketchnote type stuff. And that's something that I do on a regular basis anyways. So I feel like this is going to, all three of these things are going to come together in my final YouTube vibe, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
So I don't have all the custom drawings and things for the YouTube video that I'm going to release in the next 8 days. That one's probably just going to be short talking head type video, but this is kind of where I see all this going for me is consistently writing. And then that writing ends up as podcast topics, as newsletter articles, maybe some blog posts, YouTube videos, and then the visual aspect of that, building off of the stuff that I've been doing with sketchnoting to make those YouTube videos a little more interesting.
Sure. I'm excited for you.
So,
I'm really itching to see these. I'm sure you'll do great with
me
it, Mike.
too. Thanks. But that is it for follow up. So if it seems like we're kind of talking about lots of non follow up things in order to fill the time, we kind of are because there was nothing from the,
The
the last book.
follow up list was exactly empty. So
Yep.
we're done with it now.
I'm not sure what kind of follow up you can have from a Viktor Frankl book, but I will reiterate if you missed that one, definitely go back and listen to the episode. And I would also say definitely go back and read that book. Yes to Life was the last one that we covered. But today we are covering The Messy Middle by Scott Belsky, which is a very, very big book.
It's a monster.
Do you have any idea how many words are in this book?
Oh
I'm kind
no.
of curious.
Did you figure it out? I know it's like
No.
370 some pages, but I don't know how many words are in it.
Yeah, it's a lot, and the format of the book is sort of like the Seth Godin book that we covered. What was it? The Creative or the Practice? The Practice. That's what it was. Where it's a whole bunch of really short chapters and basically sharing a single truth, a single idea, and very much like Seth Godin, there's a lot of stuff that is condensed here into these short chapters. This book is 380 pages. The pages are pretty small print. There's a section in the middle where the print gets even smaller, but I would argue that it could have been probably 3 times as long. Do you think that's accurate?
It could be, yeah. I mean, there's a bank of, if you look through like the table of contents in this book, and there are so many points here that's like, okay, there's 3 pages on this one. It's like, dude, that could have been a chapter. Easy. Very easy. And then you go to the next one, like, oh, that could have been a chapter. It's probably more than 3 times. Like this could have been a multi-volume set very easily.
Yeah. Because what he's doing is he's condensing his experience and the things that he's learned into these smaller chapters. But the positive side of that is there's a lot of meat in this book. You can tackle it chapter by chapter. You don't have to crank through all 380 pages necessarily. That's the good news. The bad news is we did.
Yes. Yeah.
which is why I was curious about the number of words, because if the average nonfiction book is 60,000 words, this is probably 90 plus, would be my guess.
Do you think it's that, or do you think it's higher than that?
I think it's higher than that, but also the formatting of the book, like each title page, half of the page is just the title. And it's a pretty big book and the pages are big, but also a lot of them are not filled up. Like the second or third page, for example, the end of the chapter, they don't go all the way down to the bottom. So it's really hard to gauge how much white space is in this book. If I had to guess, it's probably 120,000 words.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I feel like I've seen this on. This is what I've been kind of trying to find. I feel like it's on Amazon somewhere. Like I feel like I've seen the word counts.
That's what I thought too, but I couldn't find it.
I know that there's what was it? I know that at one point they had it. You can hear me typing, looking. I know that at one point, like their API would let you pull it, like you could get the word count from that. But I'm kind of cruising through here, and I'm not seeing it, dude.
All right. Well, TLDR, it's long. So recognize that if you're going to pick this one up. If you are in any sort of, I would say, creative or entrepreneurial field, there's a lot that's going to be relevant here for you. Recognize at the beginning Scott Belsky's perspective as he writes this book. He is the author of another book called Making Ideas Happen. And he is also one of the founders of the Behance Network, which was a network for creative professionals that got purchased by Adobe for $150 million,
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
Which sounds like a lot of money until you start comparing it to some of the other acquisitions out there, like WhatsApp for $19 billion.
Soon to be Twitter.
Yeah, and it's not fair to compare that side to side, but the name of the book comes from Scott basically saying that people in the startup world specifically, they like to talk about how they started with nothing and they like to share the end of the story where they achieved their success. Nobody talks about the middle. And the messy middle, as the name implies, is it's not simple upward trajectory. There's a lot of missteps and a lot of mistakes that you make along the way, a lot of small course corrections, and there is this visual, the relative joy of creating, it's called, right at the beginning, where it starts up high like this, then goes down, and then like goes up a little bit and goes down again, and kind of over the long term trends back upwards. But I feel like anyone who has tried to create anything online can instantly relate to this visual.
Easily, because it seems like, oh, I got this new thing, let's go for it. And then you realize like you have to succeed with it and keep going, and it's like, okay, then there's like this big dip of despair almost, where you realize just how big and complicated and drawn out this thing could be. And you have this like almost stair step with some valleys and maybe some higher peaks, and like you have some of that going on until you slowly work your way up. Hopefully, not everybody does that, but that's the intent, right? To slowly work your way up that graph. And people like to talk about the very beginning. Oh, I had this great idea. And they like to talk about how we sold it for $1 billion. But they don't tell you what happened between those 2 points. And between those 2 points is exactly where he's getting with this book.
Yep. So recognize the perspective. Like I said, he's in the startup world basically. But if you are put off by that culture or that doesn't appeal to you at all, I would argue there's still a lot for you in this book. So give it a shot. That being said, let's jump into the contents here. It's broken down into 3 different sections: endure, optimize, and the final mile. Endure is the first one, so let's start there. And this one, feels long until you get past it and you get into the optimized section, and then that one is easily the the
Yeah.
biggest section of the book, and then the final mile is the last one, and that one's pretty short. But endure is interesting. This I started reading this just as on the day job we were going through a lot of the stuff that he was talking about. So I actually bought this book and gifted it to somebody that I work with, because the first time I came across something, I was like, huh, he's really describing the situation that we're in. And the second time, I'm like, wow, this is really relevant. And the third time, I'm like, okay, this is getting creepy. The fourth time, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna buy it. I hesitated to give somebody a 380-page book and say, here, you should read this,
Yep.
but I did.
Yep. And it's because, you know, Scott Belsky was the founder and lead of Behance that was sold to Adobe, right? Like we were saying. But he also was a part of a group that was like helping companies and consulting and with like startups and such. So he's done a lot of that consulting thing with many companies, even after he did some things with Adobe. So because of that, he has seen this process up close and personal many times, and knows what he's talking about, which is why as you read this, it really doesn't seem to matter where you're at, whether it's with your day job or whether it's with some things you do on your own off off hours. Like, it seems like there's something in here that's going to strike a chord, whether you're there now or whether you were there or whether it's in the future. Like, you can see this just about at any point in your walk here. So that might be why, Mike.
Yeah.
But you're right. Gifting a 370, 380 page book to somebody is always like, huh, should I do this? This is not going to be comfortable for you.
Yeah. In general, I try not to give people books and say, here, you should read this. I found every time I do that, people don't read them for the most part.
Right.
If people ask me for recommendations, I try to get back to them and say, these are the ones that I would recommend, and then leave it to them to pick up the books themselves. By the way, this is totally off topic, but I do not loan out my books. I've had a couple people ask me, hey, can I borrow a book? I'm like, nope, I'll buy it for you.
Yes. Yeah. Every time.
Yeah. In this endure section, there are again separate breakdowns. So there's a whole bunch of chapters here. There's, if you're thinking about this in the mind map section, like there's different colors for endure, optimize, and the final mile. But then under endure, there are subgroupings before you get to the chapters. So the subgroupings here, I'm not going to read all of them for optimize because there's a million of them. But just to give you an idea how this book is broken down, under endure, leading through the anguish and the unknown, strengthening your resolve, and embracing the long game. And then you get into the individual chapters, which there are a gazillion. And then in my mind map, you get the individual ideas that I thought were worth jotting down for each and every chapter. I think there's roughly 5 chapters total where I did not jot anything down other than the title. Otherwise, almost every single one of these has at least a couple of different points, which kind of illustrates how dense this book is. I also stopped trying to write down one liners isn't the right description, but there's a lot of things that Scott says in a certain way that is very distinct to him. And I like the way that he describes it, but they come so quick that I just stopped
Yeah.
trying to
Right.
log them all.
You would have a lot written down. It's a 7-page table of contents, by the way. Like, just trying
insane.
to detail out the chapters and headings and stuff. It's 7 pages for the table, and it's not
7
like this is
big
big
pages.
print either. So
Yeah.
yes,
The pages are large, the print is not.
correct.
Do you have the book right next to you?
Yeah.
You want to like show how thick it is on the stream here?
So
Yeah,
here's this monster. See if I can get it in here. Yeah, it's It's substantial.
It's a couple inches thick. It's also pretty big, and all of the text is pretty tiny.
Yep. It's little. If I can get this to go the right way. Anyway,
Yep.
yeah, it is a substantial book. So when we say it's 300, and you and I talked about this ahead of time, it's like it's a 370, 80 page book, but there's not a whole lot. I mean, there are some blank pages in here, but the text is so small that it makes up for it. So yes, it's not a
Yeah.
very quick. It's not a quick one.
So what we've done is we have just grabbed a bunch of different chapter titles basically from these different sections. We're not going to try and encapsulate everything that's in this book. Obviously, that would be a 12-hour episode just trying to summarize this beast.
Yep.
But in Endure, there are two things that we wanted to touch on. The first one I picked, and that is to prompt clarity with questions. And I picked this one just because I really like this whole idea of asking better questions. So I actually reached out to Mark Champagne, author of Personal Socrates, and was like, hey, you want to come on Focused? And he's like, yeah, sure, let's do it, which kind of caught me off guard, but turned out to be a really cool episode.
Yeah.
So I will link to that in the show notes here. But his whole thing, obviously, Personal Socrates, is a single question could completely change your life. And the whole book was on asking better questions. And so that's what I thought of when I got to this question or this section. A couple of things I jotted down here is that breakthrough often comes from a new question or problem to solve. If you're struggling to find an answer, change your question. And the perfect question is the key to clarity. And these are all different ways of saying, yeah, keep asking questions from a business perspective as well. So, Personal Socrates, personal's in the title, felt very individual. And I liked how at the beginning of this book, Scott's talking about doing this from a business perspective as well.
Yeah, because he's really jumping into the process. And again, these are small chapters. Like we're only talking about a 3-page section here of prompt clarity with questions. But in this process, that particular piece is a part of the bigger heading of strengthening your resolve, which I think is absolutely fitting in the way that he is pitching it, because asking these questions around what is it your business should be doing, what is the product, what are your customers trying to, like, what problem are you trying to solve, like those types of questions, and those aren't all what he was saying, but that type of process is one that as you're going through it, it helps you get a clear head as far as what to do and how to move forward. And the clearer you are about that path forward, and the more definition you have to that, that's where some of that resolve strengthening can come. Like that's all tied together. Thus, the two are in the same place. So I'm absolutely with you. Like asking these questions, like it's not something I've done a lot of in the past, at least not prior to reading Personal Socrates. That book kind of changed my path on that, and now I ask questions all the time. And I've learned that I don't like that because you have to confront yourself quite a bit when you start doing it, which is good. It's just uncomfortable sometimes. So there's that.
Yeah. So when you say you don't like it, you mean that it's uncomfortable or it's
Yes.
challenging, but not that you're going to stop
Yes.
doing it anytime soon.
It's the childish view of I don't like it, but the adult version of I'm gonna power through it anyway. So
Yep.
yep.
Yep. And a lot of it, it's kind of shocking to me as I reflect on Personal Socrates and I reflect on this book. There's a lot of it coming down to basically just self awareness. And self awareness in a business context is different because you're maybe have a bunch of other areas and a bunch of other people that you really need to make sure that you're seeing things the right way. It's a lot more potential responsibility, but the process is the same, and the only thing you can't do in either scenario is bury your head in the sand and pretend that it's not the way it is.
Right.
You gotta confront the brutal reality, and there's lots of little things in these other chapters which will probably come up, like, as we're talking about this and wanting to hide from what's really there. In the previous chapter, he talks about insecurity work, which is the work that you do with no intended outcome, doesn't move the ball forward in any specific way, but it's quick enough that you can do it unconsciously multiple times per day, and is the thing that you default to when you want to avoid something, basically, when you're trying to procrastinate on tackling the thing that is really important. And it's kind of interesting for me to see how that manifests differently in an organization or a company than it does in an individual's life. Like, I've dealt with it myself from a knowledge worker perspective, and I'm working at home and I'm trying to create things, but it's a little bit different when you've got a lot of moving pieces on the chessboard.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, and one of the other, so if we kind of continue in this endure piece, unless there's something more you want to say here, Mike, because I feel like this next one is one we could spend some time on, but that's
Yeah, go for it.
the idea of, and how does he put it here? Sometimes a reset is the only way forward. So think about the basis of this book. You've got a company or a product or something that you're building. The beginning's exciting, the end is exciting, the part in the middle is a challenge. So what do you do in the middle when you hit these challenges? And his point here is that sometimes whenever you've got everything moving forward and it's not working and you're having issues with it and it continues to be a pain, sometimes the best thing you can do is completely reset the entire process. A lot of times, if you're in bigger companies, a reorganization or something happens, or entire departments get dropped and moved around and such, like stuff like that happens. And we think of things like that as a bad thing, but it can be a very good thing if you're willing to see it for what it is, because sometimes that reset, or as Mike put in his newsletter, a pivot, whenever you make that change or that slight diversion from where you were going to begin with, like, that can make all the difference. Like, that can completely change the way that your whole company and product operates in a very good way, and can help you get onto the path of being successful with it and getting through that difficult season in the middle, right? So that's one that I know, like, I'm in the middle of a major one right now with all my online stuff, and there's stuff on the channel like we were talking about earlier that's going on. So if that's something that's got to happen, then you need to jump in head first. But it's not always fun to do that. And having the guts to say, I need to do a reset or I need to do a pivot is not always easy to do.
It's not always easy. I would actually say it's almost never easy,
That's true.
but by the time you realize maybe I should pivot, it's absolutely necessary.
Yep.
I would argue.
Yep. Seems like
I've
once that thought crosses your mind, the answer is yes.
Yep. Yeah, it's not it's past the point of debating at by the time you typically realize it. At least in for me, I think that's true. But also, like you were talking about, there's a lot of value in embracing that. The things that are valuable and worthwhile in life, it seems to me, are always difficult to do. It's never easy. It's rarely fun, but you just have to push through it and get to the other side. It requires a vision, knowing that this is a season and this too will pass, and believing that what you are doing is the right thing long term for, in this case, the organization, but it could be the family, the team, whatever. Doesn't make it any easier in the moment to say we have to make this really difficult decision And people won't understand sometimes when you say, trust me, this is in your best interest. But that's what leadership is. The more I study it, the more I see it in action. The things that really help you level up in life are the ones that you tend to want to avoid, but when you can't or when you choose not to, they cause you to rise to the occasion. And when you're called upon to get to that level, you almost don't even know if you've got it in you at the point that you're being asked to do it. It's really, really scary. But then once you do it, it's like you're like a rubber band being stretched out of shape. That's a bad thing, but this is in a good thing. It's like you're never going back to the way that you were. Your capacity has now increased. You are a totally different person than you were prior to this crisis happening. And when you think about everything good, every sort of transition from one season to another, any sort of upgrade is going to require that kind of crisis and that kind of change. You've got to go through it. So once you understand that this is part of the process and you know that this is kind of the gateway, this is the thing that's going to get me from where I am to where I need to be, you don't have to dread it. It doesn't make it easier in the moment sometimes, but if you can step back and realize how necessary it is and big picture view, you know, you can create and manufacture the motivation that you need to get through it without being so emotionally distraught.
There's a section later on. I was trying to find it, but I'm not seeing it. It's in the optimized section, but he gets to where he's talking about uh, putting yourself around people who have been through a lot, who have been through a lot of difficulties, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, something kind of along the same lines is there's a quote by C.S. Lewis that my wife has on the wall. Let's see if I can get this right. Love is something more stern and strict. I think it's strict, maybe splendid, than mere kindness. And that's always struck me a little bit like, wait, what? But when you think about it, whenever you've when you've got someone who truly loves you, whether that's romantically or as a friend, then they are willing to tell you when things are wrong or go through the difficult things with you. And then when you come out of that, you're in a much better place because you've been through something difficult together. This is the classic when you've got friends who are able to stick around and they're around you all the time when things are easy, but the moment things get hard, they run away. Like that's exactly what we're talking about with that anyway. But once you've been through those things, those friendships and those people are the ones that are really tight to you. Like it's almost painful to not have them around. And this is very similar to that in that whenever you have folks with you who've been through those things, like you can grow from that. When you yourself are going through those things, you grow from that and you become a much better person at the other side. So even if this messy middle is something that's painful and you really don't want to do it and you want to skip it, like a lot of times it's that middle part that is what makes that final success, right? If you really can't skip this and
No.
have something that's going to endure. You really need to deal with these difficulties in order to get the learnings to have that success.
Exactly. And going back to the image at the beginning, I feel a lot of the pain that people feel going through the messy middle really is just improper expectation setting. You start something and you expect it to be smooth sailing, you expect it to go well, and when it doesn't go according to plan, you have a choice to either keep going or say this isn't what I signed up for and quit. And what Scott is arguing for in the scope of the entire book is that moment where you have that identity crisis and you're not sure what to do because this is hard, recognizing that's part of the process and just keep going and that there will actually be multiples of these, then it's kind of like, oh, okay, so this is normal. I guess it's really not that big a deal. Maybe I shouldn't freak out quite so much about it. I think the section you were maybe trying to allude to was hire people who have endured adversity
Yeah.
because adversity matures you,
Right.
right? Cool. All right, so let's jump into the next section here because who knows how long we'll talk about optimize. I really like that section. There's some other stuff I want to get to, but just continuing that topic, there's another thing further down in here which I thought was really good and relevant to what we're talking about here in the clearing the path to solutions section, where it talks about a lot of big problems don't get solved because we can solve smaller problems faster. And when you're talking about adversity and pushing through things, if you view that as I must be on the wrong path, the fact that this is causing me some pain, this must be wrong. Well, number one, I mean, just because you're experiencing some pain, maybe that you are doing the wrong thing and you don't want to continue to burn your hand on the stove. So recognize like if it's self-inflicted and stop doing some of those things. But assuming that this is the right thing and this is just part of the process, then you typically want to keep going with that. But the natural thing, and I think this is something that we all do in some way, shape, or form related to procrastination, is instead of embracing the big thing that we know is going to be hard, we find the small thing just so we can say, there, I did something.
Yep. Yep.
And I'm guilty of this. I'm kind of curious, how you've seen this manifest in your own life, but literally just talking about this with somebody in the day job, how we have all of these issues that we track, and we have these regular EOS style level 10 meetings every week, and it becomes meeting time again for a department. It's like, oh, I haven't looked at this since last week. Well, I want to show that I did something. So you scan the list and you find the one that you can quick take care of and mark as complete before the meeting is there. See, I did something. That's not the complete story that you tell in your head at the time, but that's ultimately
Right.
the way it manifests. So
Yep.
how does this play out for you?
Oh, I'm terrible at like finding the little things that improve, like, so take so much of like the writing and video stuff and such that we do. I will regularly justify like some of my script and automation stuff, saying that I'm making something or building something that I can then write about later. And it could be something very small and very simple to make my life easier, but I will justify it saying this is a thing that I can use for later and that I'm actually making progress towards these endeavors. And then I spend the 30 minutes to an hour on it, and then I get distracted by something else, and then I go do something completely different, forget about it, and it never has anything to do with an article or a video. It's like, oh, but I did something and it was theoretically going to help, but it gets me absolutely nowhere. So I
Mm.
do this all the time. It's terrible.
Yeah, we are kind of naturally wired to seek the path of least resistance. Maybe that's what my YouTube video will be.
There you
It's
go.
one of those ideas I captured previously. So we look for the place where we experience the least amount of pushback and we say, I'm going to do that. But everything that's worthwhile doing, resistance is part of the deal.
Right.
And in fact, you could gauge the worthwhile things based on the amount of resistance that you encounter.
Yep.
So that's challenging to me. But then also coupled with that, the first chapter in this section is resourcefulness over resources. It's kind of a mouthful for me to say today. I don't know why. But the difference here is resourcefulness is I need to do this thing. I don't know how I'm going to get it done, but I'll just use what I've got and figure it out. Versus resources is I have everything that I need in order to do the thing. And we were talking about YouTube earlier. This is one of the things that a lot of people, myself included, fall into when they're getting into YouTube. Ollie was talking about people want to know what's the gear that I should have and all the setup and stuff like that. And he says it doesn't matter. Just start with your phone and start making videos, right? And I've actually had a DM message or DM thread back and forth before I even signed up with the course with Ollie, probably his team through his Twitter account, but basically saying, I'm interested in this course, but I'm not going to be able to make a bunch of videos right now. So is this still for me? Like, oh yeah, yeah, it's fine. But the messaging in the course is always like, just do the thing, just do the thing, just
Right.
do the thing. They keep sending these calendar invites for people these last couple of weeks who haven't published a video yet. So I keep getting those
Yeah.
invites, but I feel kind of bad because that's kind of the way the cohort is built, but also I said up front, I wasn't going to be able to do it
Right. Right.
till later. So that's a way that can manifest though, and I've noticed that myself is like, well, I got to get the B-roll, I got to do all this. I have a vision for like what I want it to look like and how it's going to fit into everything else. If I was just doing YouTube, I would argue the better approach for me would just make the thing, get it out there. But because I'm not really just trying to figure out YouTube, but I have a specific strategy for it and how it feeds all the other things, like I kind of know what I want this to look like already. You really don't know what it's going to look like though until you start doing the thing. That was the whole idea behind the newsletter that I sent out is you got to do some things and you got to fail at some things and you got to deconstruct why you failed, and then you start looking around for what are some other ways that I can do this? How can I practice resourcefulness, not just buy better gear and have the resources in order to do it? And when you start looking around, you see the things that are parallel to what you are currently doing. And a lot of those things, as I've gone through my own career path, I'm like, oh, hey, actually, that thing over there, that looks pretty interesting. I think I'll try that. Those have been some of the most rewarding experiences in not just my professional life, but my personal life as well. Like podcasting was part of that. Public speaking was part of that. Those were things that if you would have just asked me prior to starting to take this approach, I would have been like, yeah, yeah, no thanks. That's too public for me because I'm a pretty introverted person. I wonder sometimes people who encounter my stuff online, um, how what they think I'm like in real life. I'm sure it's very different than reality.
Sure. I'm always intrigued by that one as well. It's like, what is the public perception of me? What do
Yep.
people think? Huh. I don't know. It's always a question mark, I think. But I'm with you in that it's easy for us as people who have like legitimate studios with cameras and microphones and gear and stuff all over the place. Like it's easy for us to say like, yeah, I need to get this before I can do that. Like before I can make quality YouTube videos, my camera is not as good as it should be. Like, well, I mean, you've got a Blackmagic camera in your office. I've got a Sony 6400, like super nice microphones. Like there is no excuse, at least for us. Now, I say that, and yet I know of people who have done podcast recordings with just the ear pods that come with your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And in a couple cases, I know of people who are doing that, and you would swear they're using like a high-end microphone because of the way that they have edited that thing. So I'm aware that it is possible to do that sort of thing. I don't want to do that because I like the gear, but that's what a lot of us will do. Like, I can't do that until this. And really, the answer here is like with the resourcefulness versus resources. Like, instead of spending your resources on gear or services in order to make something happen, like just go do it. Like find a way to do it without that, and don't make the excuse. Like and this is common too. Like even creators, whenever you do get an income off of something, it's very easy for us to want to take that income and use it to upgrade the gear. Like that's the first reaction, right?
Yeah.
When actually the better answer is take that money and figure out how it would help your audience better, whether that's offering a new service or making it easier to consume the thing. Like I don't know what that all would be, but if you can focus on that as opposed to I want a better microphone or I really want that Rodecaster Pro, like whatever it is, because that was my thing for a while. And if you can do that, like you're better off. That's what Scott's getting at here.
Yeah, and from a organizational perspective, there's even an additional difference here in that resources become depleted, but resourcefulness does not. And he actually says in this chapter that nothing disrupts resourcefulness more than a sudden influx of resources, which that statement kind of caught me off guard. So you can take somebody who's resourceful, you can give them a whole bunch of stuff, and then actually they lose the thing that made them successful in the first place, right? Which is kind of wild when you think about it that way. It maybe doesn't transmit totally to the example you were talking about, because the fact that you have the Rodecaster Pro does not mean that you are less likely to podcast now. It's not something that you're going to use up over time. But I feel like this couples very nicely with the next chapter, which isn't in the outline, but I just want to touch on it briefly. Initiative over experience, because people with initiative will often exceed your expectations. And I would say that the people who are resourceful are the people who have initiative. And he says, initiative is contagious, expertise is not. So if you're thinking about experience, which is how a lot of people will hire for a job, is you got to have so much experience or you have to have this title, whatever. All that means, if they've got the degree or they've got the certification, is that at one point in their life, they had a bunch of resources, right? It really is not a good indication of whether they are this scrappy, emotionally intelligent, can figure it out on their own type of person, which Scott is arguing in this section is so valuable for your team, because this whole section here is on building, hiring, and firing, and really about how Jim Collins would say getting the right people on the bus, right? These are the people who can help you build your organization, because you don't really know what this thing is going to be when you start building this thing. You just got to assemble these awesome people. And when you get enough awesome people together, something magical happens, and the idea that you had gets shifted a little bit. And what comes out on the other end ends up being much more valuable, much more precious than anything you could have done on your own.
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense. But yes, you also have to be like, so much of it has to be a mindset, right? Which I think is what you're getting at. Like just choosing
Yes.
to be willing to work through work through things without just relying on money, right? If you got the money,
Yeah.
it all gets easy.
Yeah, a lot of this is mindset stuff, I guess, but emotional intelligence I see as part of this as well. It's the type of thing where if you're trying to build a team that is going to statistically make your organization or business better in the long run, the things that you would traditionally look for are not the things that are really going to move the needle. It's hard to measure resourcefulness.
Yeah,
It's easy to measure resources,
right. Yeah, for sure.
which kind of leads into the next chapter I wanted to talk about: accommodate free radicals, because I feel like I am a free radical. I feel like you're a free radical.
Yeah.
Free radicals, he talks about in this chapter, they are basically people who work different. They have unbound energy sources. They are unbound energy sources who work on their teams. They're often misunderstood in the workplace because they're not going to conform to this is just the way that everybody does things. And I'm fortunate I'm in a position, and you're fortunate that you're in a position where they're cool with us being free radicals and recording Bookworm today, right? Because they recognize that this actually brings value in other ways to the organization, us having the freedom to do this on our own terms. I guess, if you were to simplify this, it's really just focus on the outcome and the production rather than the seat time and the hours, punching the clock, that sort of thing, which a lot of, let's just say, more traditional companies, that's their measure of success is, did they make 100 calls today? And I've been a salesperson, so I understand, yes, you need to make the calls. And if you're procrastinating on making the calls, then that's an appropriate measure, is just make X number of calls today. But ultimately, what matters is not the number of calls that you make. It's the appointments that you set or the sales that you get, right? And there's other ways that you can do that stuff. And what you really want is somebody who is willing to figure that out and navigate that. And they understand, okay, what the organization really wants is the sale itself. So if I can move this number, then I have flexibility in this number or how I actually.
There you are. Sorry, cut out for a second. That was weird.
It's all right.
Um, I lost my train of thought completely. Yes, so free radicals. Okay. I feel like when you and I are able to do this sort of thing, like we're definitely breaking a lot of conventions, I would say, when it comes to like how schedules and stuff work. So I could easily see how we definitely break a lot of those conventions, but at the same time, like if you're able to, as an organization, accommodate people like us who break rules, like generally you're better off overall. So like that I can kind of see. But as someone who often works with other people who are in the same boat, like it's sometimes challenging. It's like, do I have to let you do these things? Please just follow the
Mm-hmm.
pattern. So I get where it's both a positive and a difficult thing on both sides. So I get that.
I understand it, but I also, the more I read about this, the more I study it myself, I feel more strongly that it doesn't really matter big picture. If you've got the right people, then they will figure out how to do the right things. In fact, the next chapter that I wanted to talk about here is that process is the excretion of misalignment. And this is not the first place that he talks about process and how process is kind of a mask of deeper problems. This one specifically, he's talking about misalignment. Okay, so if you are aligned, you don't need a bunch of processes telling people exactly what to do. The goal is to be fully aligned with as little process as possible. And so you're giving people the freedom to do it the way that they see fit, trusting that they can do their job better than you can from a distance if you were to micromanage them. And so they're going to get better results. In the previous section, I don't remember exactly where, but he talked about process being the thing that will help mitigate the weaknesses of B players, but it also completely handicaps your A players. If you've got a strong team, really just awesome individuals who are motivated, who know what they're supposed to do, and you give them a bunch of process, you're going to significantly slow them down. But if you have a bunch of people who you're not really sure if they have what it takes, then you can mask a lot of those weaknesses through complicated processes. And I've been thinking a lot about this and work the system and document everything, right? And I don't know exactly where I land on this yet. I feel like there's some essential processes which you need in order to delegate things and make sure everybody's doing certain things the same way. But really, the thing that is more important is getting everyone aligned on this is the lever we want to pull. This is the measure we want to influence. What do you think on this whole topic of like process versus systems and alignment?
Yeah, I think that there's easily a point at which all of these processes in general get to be bloated and a problem, and it also gets to be super common, I guess. So there's so many times I've had in the past where I'm in a corporation, I'm in a company of some kind, and they want to put together multiple steps for something to happen so that you have something that's repeatable. I get that, but there's so many points in the process where the the system or the protocol that they put in place almost hamstrings the entire intent.
Exactly.
So, because of the process that is in place, it means that I'm not able to do something innovative or actually helpful. Here's an example. This one was very painful. Uh, when I worked corporate, one of the things that we had to do was collect a seed order. This was in agriculture, so we had to collect corn and soybean seed orders from our sales representatives who were out in the field taking those orders from farmers, right? So all of that data needed to be collected into one place. Because of the process, because of the system, in order for them to collect one order from one farmer for one field in the entire United States, it had to get entered in 3 different places. And it had to match in all 3 places. And it had to use all of the fancy I can't even think of what they were. It's the process where it's ownership by the person when it leaves the truck versus when it goes onto the truck. I forget what those terms are anymore, but it was all of that stuff. And the sales reps were the ones that had to enter these things 3 different places. In a couple cases, the terms were backwards, so they had to use it one way in process 1 and a different way in process 2 and a different way again in process 3. So you had to do all of those things in different methods. My job as data analyst person was to help collect some of that information. And one of the things that I did was attempt to create a 4th system, which, because they wouldn't let us alter those 3, I went through a process of trying to build a web interface that allowed them to enter it in one spot that would then automatically take that information and decode it and put it into the other 3. Because the process was so convoluted and a mess. I spent like 3 months building that thing so that these guys didn't have to deal with those 3 other systems. And it worked great, but we slid it underneath all of the protocol because it was absolutely against what the corporation wanted us to do. We had 0 approvals to do it. So because of that, after the fact, they shut it all down because we weren't allowed to do that again. And the sales reps threw a fit. They loved that thing. But it was all because of their protocol. Had they not put that protocol in place,
Yeah.
they wouldn't have had that big of a backlash whenever they shut down the easy thing to use. So I understand why some systems and some protocols are in place. I get it. But if you've got them in place and it creates a lot of extra work and it makes things more difficult to do at all, like, you've gone way too far with it. Please stop.
Yeah, I'm fortunate that in the position I'm in with the day job, there are a lot of complicated processes, and I'm the new guy, and I'm just like, why are we doing it this way? And everyone seems to be on board with letting me try to figure out new things.
Yeah.
But it does require blowing a lot of stuff up, which makes people nervous.
Yeah.
And I understand that. Like going back to the Colby stuff, I am a high fact finder, a low quick start. So if I was on the other end of that, I would be freaking out. I get it, but I also see the importance of the alignment and how that makes everything so much easier. It reminds me of something that I read at one point. I don't remember where it was about the 2 horse rule. You're probably familiar with this, kind of makes the productivity circles. But if you've got 2 horses and one can pull 300 pounds and another can pull 150 pounds, that's the example that I had heard. Together, they can pull not 450 pounds, but there's a force multiplier that's applied. So it's more like 900 pounds when they're pulling in the same direction. If they are not pulling in the same direction, then it actually gets harder, which is why process at least, keeps that from happening. But the best thing that you can do is if you've got smart people say, this is where we're going, and then you can activate that force multiplier. And I think as I reflect on work the system, now I have to go back and reread it, but I'm thinking through all my big takeaways from that. And my question would be, if I need to make all that documentation, do I have the right people on this
Yeah.
team?
Yeah.
Because that to me is not just part of the process, but you've got to ask yourself why. Why is this documentation necessary? Is it because people don't understand? If they don't understand, why don't they understand? Is it because they disagree? No one has convinced them that this is the right thing to do? Are they incapable of understanding? Are they like actively rebelling against the vision of leadership? Like there are other issues to be unpacked here rather than just get the individual to do the thing.
Right. Right. I know there's many times when my underling, as I refer to him, he knows I call him this. He's so my assistant. He handles a lot of like the Sunday morning repetitive stuff, and there's a checklist that he goes through every Sunday that helps him make sure everything gets done. And I feel like when we talk about systems and protocols, something like that is very helpful because like that's not a system or a process in place to make sure that everybody complies. That is so that it's not forgotten. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that we have a handful of like procedures and protocols here at the church that we follow, but the ones that are documented, not all of them are. The ones that are documented, we've been trying to make sure we put a why section in there. It's like, why does this exist?
Yes.
And that helps significantly because when we hand it over to somebody, like somebody who's new, an organization that's new to the building, they're not familiar with how we do things here, like who does the setup, who does the cleanup, if you need tech help, what do you do, like all of those questions. Like there's a whole standard operating procedure for all of that, and each of those sections has a why underneath of it so that people who are brand new to us know where all that stuff came from. And that has actually been more helpful than just telling people what it is they're supposed to do, follow suit. Like it doesn't become that. It becomes a here's why you need to operate underneath these methods. Otherwise, bad things happen, and we don't want you to have those bad things happen. So that I find helpful. But if you didn't have that why section in there, think about how that comes across. If somebody hands you a document that explains the way that you're supposed to operate with an organization, it doesn't have the why on it, it just seems ludicrous and ridiculous. Like think of the classic M&Ms in the candy bowl. I don't want any of the brown ones in there. Like that whole thing. Why on earth would you ever, like people are immediately second guessing it, and now they don't think any of the rest of it is worthwhile because you've got this ridiculous request and all these things.
Yeah.
Like I when we have people outside guests come in and they always give us their tech needs, every once in a while they'll have a rider that comes with it that says like they need this many water bottles, or they want a table of this size, and like they'll have all these things that they want. We have had one person who came in who had the M&M thing on it, and it had something about they didn't want more than I think 100 M&Ms in a bowl or something like that. It was about M&Ms legitimately. And I know that someone here saw that and they're like, "What? Can we cancel them?" Like we're not dealing with this. So, but there was no why involved with it because they didn't explain the purpose of all of that. Now, people who've been around it know that story and why it's there, but if you're not familiar with it, it just seems ridiculous. I'm rambling at this point, but you get my point, I think.
I think that is actually an exercise in getting alignment from an outside source, though. I mean, they don't have the time to build the relationships and to establish trust. They just need to know these things that are essential for me to do this thing are going to get taken care of. So I actually think that's totally fine.
Yeah.
And I think the one that you're talking about, the checklist, that's also
Mm-hmm.
totally fine. Now imagine if that checklist had all of the detailed instructions on how to do each thing and was an entire manual that you had to crank through every single time, right? That's going to be cumbersome. And I understand why you want all those processes documented and why you've got the why there. But why do you do that in the first place? I think it's because you're trying to get somebody new on board, like you were talking about, getting them up to speed in order to do this thing so you no longer have to do it as quickly as possible. And I think that is perfectly legitimate. As I was reading this section, though, I kind of was thinking more about the the team itself, though, kind of like the talent that we have assembled here. Do we have the right people? And that's where the process, I feel, can work against you. Because if you have very regimented process and you insist on everybody following it, that's fine at the beginning when you're getting up to speed. But if all they do is follow that detailed process to the letter every single time, you're just delaying finding out whether you've got the right people there. At some point, as scary as it seems, you need to ask them to think for themselves. And maybe that's a radical thought in the business world. I don't know, but seems kind of obvious to me.
Yeah, yeah. At the same time, though, I can think of teams that I've been on where, like, when it comes to writing and such, like, I'm not incompetent. Like, I know how that process works. I've done it for years. Like, it's not a new thing. Publishing blog posts, like, I know what I'm up to with that. And I've been a part of teams where that's my job, is to do some of that writing, and yet there's difficulty for me to know what it is that's needed, like in the specific scenarios. You know what I mean? Like, I know my side of it,
Hmm.
but how do I work with you with that? And that interface between me and the other person has almost no process to it. And without the explanation or without the communication, it can become a detriment in itself. And part of it is because
Sure.
they trust me so much in that I can do a good job, that there isn't a process in place, when I would really like to know, when do you need this in respect to a published date, and what is it you need, like how much detail, what format, where, all of those things. How do I get it into that thing? Like, all of these things are potentially helpful in that scenario, and yet it's not always communicated. So you can go the other way with it too, I think. Like, you can trust them so much that you don't help them do their job as well.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think the middle ground here would be kind of the next point on the outline, which was something you wanted to talk about. That simple is sticky,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you're trying to delegate a process so you no longer have to do it anymore, telling them every bit of information that there is to know that's going to happen on this Sunday morning is going to quickly overwhelm them and make it much, much harder for them to get to the point where they can do it on their own.
Right. Right. Yeah, I wanted this part in the outline here because, and this isn't a chapter heading. I think this is the only one on our list here that's not. It's a quote that's inside of one of the explanations of a chapter. But simple is sticky. Like, that quote stood out to me because there's a lot of things where you may have a process, a system, a way of working with someone else that is somewhat complicated, and the moment that you work towards simplifying it and consolidating, condensing, bringing it down to something much more manageable, like, that tends to stick, and it tends to not change very often. So the simpler it is, the more likely it is to hang around. So I find that fascinating, and it's partially because of my own drive towards, like, simple productivity systems. Like, that's becoming a thing that I'm trying to work towards. Thus, like, dropping tasks in the middle of my project notes and being able to pull them out of it, just because it's simple. Like that sort of thing is more what I'm.
'Cause it's awesome.
It does work well. So like is something I'm pushing more for, right? Is the simplicity side of it. And I think that there's a lot to be said for it, and yet a lot of, if we stick with productivity systems, at least the ones that I've done in the past or that I've learned from in the past, are fairly complicated. They may appear simple on the surface, but on the backside, they are complicated. And that's not helpful. Like on the face of things, it has to be simple, and behind the scenes, it has to be simple. Communicating meeting notes should not be a complicated process. Figuring out how many people you had in an event should not be complicated. Like, don't overcomplicate these things. Make them simple, and the simpler you make it, the more it's going to stick around. Thus, simple is sticky.
Yeah. For reference, go back and listen to The Great Mental Models, Volume 1, where we talk about Occam's razor.
Yep. Yep. I use that one
The
quite a
simplest
bit
solution
with
is the best solution.
my fun little underling. If we keep using that term. I've referred to Occam's razor with him many times because I love him, but he jumps to the most complicated, convoluted solution to anything that's wrong. Like, this video isn't showing up on that screen. I'm sure the memory is overloaded and the fans are cranked up and it just can't get the video out of the port. Like, or the TV's off. Like, it could be something that simple. And we go up and hit the power button, and guess what? It comes on. Oh, okay. Like, I love him, but jumping to those doesn't
to
help.
defend the underling here, I feel like for someone who takes an analytical approach to solving problems, that is a learned skill.
It is.
To try the obvious things, because when you're trying to figure out all the different reasons why this could be, and you tend to think, well, of course people tried this before they brought it to my attention. No, they probably didn't.
Correct. Yep. The classic, like, have you tried restarting it? Everyone will tell you yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I can run a quick command in terminal and find out what the uptime is on that computer. And I know when it was last shut down or restarted. I can figure this out. And when someone tells me it's been restarted, guess what my first thing is I do? I open a command prompt and find out. And if the answer is no, they didn't, I will do it again. So, yes. Yeah. Simple. I like it.
One more in this optimized section, which you picked, but I also was going to pick: make a plan, but don't plan on sticking to it. They mentioned my favorite Dwight Eisenhower quote in this section: plans are worthless, but planning is everything.
Yep.
This was the one chapter in the entire thing, actually, where I felt like he didn't do a great job of defining. Like, obviously, he starts on a strong foundation with that quote, but maybe it's just because I have kind of studied this and have my
I was
own
gonna say, I feel
synthesized my own thoughts on this. But yeah, like, I felt like I could have written this maybe a little bit more effectively than he did.
this is probably
Just
one
this
of those
one section.
cases
That's
where
it.
it could have been a long chapter, and it's one that you really like, so you wanted him to make it a longer chapter, but it's actually the same
That's
as all the
completely
others.
fair. Yep, completely fair.
Oh, Mike, we do this all the time.
We do. Just for summary, for those who are new to that idea, the basic argument is that you can plan out your day, and a lot of people will do that, try it, and then when it doesn't go the way that they planned it, they stop doing it because they're like, oh, what's the point? But the point is the clarity and the intention that comes from creating the plan. It's not having the plan itself, it's the act of creating it that provides the value. And there's a whole bunch of additional things I would add, especially for an individual around creating a plan. But he did talk about some of the big stuff, like building in the margins. So when something goes over or something finishes a little bit early, you can kind of shift the plan and accommodate things. But yeah, it's different when you're talking about doing this in a startup than you are in a typical knowledge worker planning their day.
Yeah, because I know that I have long said that it's impossible for me to plan my day. Like that, I say that quite a bit because I never know what's going to come up. Like I know that I've got a video editing project I'm in the middle of right now that needs to get done, but I've had people interrupting me on it all week long. I'm probably gonna have to pull some long hours tomorrow to get it done. Like I know this, but yet I have to take some steps away from it, like I'm doing here today, because I can't look at it that long. For like I can't look at it for 12 hours straight. Cannot do it. So I have to get some breaks from it. It's what I was doing before we started here. It's what I'm going to do when we're done. So that sort of thing is something I have to do because of the uh, focus needs and such. But anyway, planning the day, like I know that I'm going to have a lot of distractions throughout the day, and I've long said like I can't nail down when I'm going to do what. But yet I have, even as I've said that, I've usually had a this morning, even if it's just mentally, this morning I need to get this done, this afternoon I need to do that, and somewhere between here and lunchtime I need to get these three things accomplished. Like I haven't formally written out like an hour by hour thing, but I kind of know when certain things need to happen that day. So because of that, I kind of have a rough plan for what I'm going to accomplish that day. But I also know that like it's not going to happen the way I visualize it. Maybe that's why I don't want to write it all down, because I don't think it's worth it. So
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So we're
so
creating an action item for Joe here.
yeah, sure, write it down. And then it's just yeah. So we could potentially do that. I'll take that. That's fine. I'm writing it down.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
legit writing it down right
that's the
now.
that's the argument, and I think there is diminishing returns for doing this at some point. You know, if you're brand new in your role and it feels like everything is just coming at you, this actually brings a whole ton of clarity. If you're established and you kind of in the back of your head know how the Legos fit together, then don't worry about it. But if you've not done it before, I think this is absolutely an exercise that everybody should do, which is why I push you to make it an action
Yeah.
item.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. You're good at that
Yep.
anymore.
Yeah. That's why I'm here. All right. Should we talk about the final mile?
Sure. Get me off of this whole Mike giving me tasks thing.
All right. So the final mile, this is the shorter section in the book, but there's a couple things worth unpacking here. The big one you picked out, and that is that you are not your work. Let's talk about that one first, because this is something that is hard for a lot of people to separate. I never even made the connection about like founders of these startup companies when they make the sale, which is the whole thing they're working for, kind of the depression that sets in and the identity crisis that they go through. But I have definitely wrestled through this myself as a creative. So definitely not on the same level. He shared some stories in here about his grandpa who sold a company and kind of went into depression afterwards. And I, there's a whole bunch of tangential topics there about finding something new to do after that and things like that. But I think the thing we should focus on here is that your identity is not solely in your production. Your value is not tied to what you produce. And I feel like we've talked about this a lot, and I kind of sound like a broken record at this point, but I also feel it is extremely important to hammer this home as often as we can. You are not what you do.
And it's so hard though, and this is why I wanted to talk about it again, because it's difficult to do this separation. It just is, and I feel like I keep wanting to bring it up and keep talking about it, partially for my own benefit, and partially because I know that just about everybody I talk to struggles with this. It doesn't seem to matter what your industry is. I know that I've talked to farmers that struggle with this one. Like, you can do everything right and it still fails. Like it can happen. So
Hmm.
this is something that I know, and when that happens, people can go into depressions and really bad places because the thing that they were working on failed, and they feel like that's a reflection on themselves. But this actually, one of the things that comes back to my mind whenever I process this is the book Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, and the concept of you
Yep.
can have all of the information in front of you and you can make a solid decision. It doesn't turn out the way you think it will, and it could be a bad result. That doesn't mean you made a bad decision. That just means that things didn't go the way you thought they would. But given the information you had at the time, it was the right decision. And if you could look back on it, yeah, you'd probably change it. But if you didn't have the 2020 vision, the hindsight side of it, then you would have made the exact same decision ahead of time, like beforehand. So because of all that concept, like, you have to be aware that whenever you're making something, whenever you're doing work and you're creating things, whether it's putting in a water heater or making a video for YouTube and anything in between, it doesn't seem to matter. The things that you're producing are not you. And just because the quality of that thing is something that some random person doesn't appreciate, it either means that's the wrong audience for the thing, for the video, for the work that you're doing, or you're just in the learning process and you need to get better at it and your skills aren't there yet. Whenever I listen to some of the early podcasts that I've ever recorded or watch some of the videos I first made, I cringe. This is why creators don't like to go back in the archives to look at things, right? Mike, when's the last
Yep.
time you went and looked at your first pod or listened to your first podcast? Have you done this
Not gonna
recently?
happen.
No,
Nope.
don't do it. It's scary. You don't want to do it because you grow and you get a lot better over time. So you don't want to make that your identity, the thing that you're doing. You have to somehow separate those two. Thus, I feel like we need to keep bringing it up because it's something that's really hard to do.
Well, the other thing I want to talk about is related to this on the inverse. So, overcome your resistance to a great outcome is another chapter here, which is kind of tied to you are not your work, because in that section, he tells a story about this person who had been with this company, Behance, as they were getting ready to be acquired by Adobe. And they kind of all knew that this was coming. And this guy just kept doing dumb stuff, saying stupid things. And Scott's like, this is really out of character for this guy. Why is he sabotaging himself? We're about to get this big payday and he's trying to get himself fired. Right. And he tells his wife, and his wife's like, oh, yeah, he doesn't. I forget exactly what she said, but she knew exactly what it was. And she's basically said, he doesn't feel like he deserves it. And so next time he did something, Scott cornered him in the conference room and he's like, you deserve this success. And the guy's like, what? And he says it again, you deserve this success. And then the guy breaks down, no issues from that point forward.
Right?
Kind of Goodwill Hunting style, right? It's not your fault.
Yes. Yes.
Which seems like a ridiculous story, but I I really like that one. And I feel like this is something that I have wrestled with. Not to that degree, but as long as you think you have to, your value is in what you do. If you get a better than expected result, there is the tendency to say, I don't deserve this. And you can kind of self sabotage in a way. And you feel like you've got to put more effort in, or you got to do more work, or you got to make more sacrifice. This wasn't as hard for me as somebody else. So you compare yourself and you say, well, this must not be true. So you don't embrace the good side of the scenario. And I've been thinking about this a lot, not as it pertains to this particular book, but for myself personally. The phrase that comes up is give yourself permission to dream again. Like, we get conditioned over time to thinking like, oh, it's not that easy, and I'm not that good, I'm not that talented, I'm not that smart, whatever. And you temper your expectations, you temper your goals, you temper your vision based on what you think you are capable of. And I do believe that we are all capable of more than we realize. Kind of like we were talking about at the very beginning. We don't really know what we're capable of until being asked or forced to rise to the occasion. And so I've noticed that myself, just kind of being like, well, this is probably what this is going to look like. And I think it's unhealthy to try to be too realistic when you're thinking about your future and what you want to see happen. I think it's good for you to assume the sky's the limit. Like, one of the questions I've been thinking about is, what would it look like if you were wildly successful in whatever area, however you want to apply that? I feel like that's a worthwhile thought exercise that can bring a lot of hope.
Yes, absolutely. Because I feel like there's so much that can be done whenever you're willing to explore and be creative again. It's
Mm-hmm.
easy whenever you follow this. So follow the path here, right? So you've got the beginning idea. You've got a business you're starting. You've got an online thing you're going to start, whatever it is. You're going to be an HVAC guy. So whenever you first have that idea, like it's the initial high, right? But whenever you come back off of that, the mundane can really get to be overwhelming, and there is a point at which you're like grasping for air and you're just trying to power through. But whether you're doing the pivots, you're doing resets, you're doing the optimized process on yourself, your team, the business, all of these things, it's real easy. There's a whole section in here he talks about like disconnecting. It's real easy to just get stuck in the rut of always trying to optimize as well. The things he's talking about are not bad, but you do need to take a step back from the entire thing occasionally in order to see the bigger picture, like what you're saying, Mike, and get kind of the bigger view of it so that you can get the ideas and be more creative with the whole thing, which is what got you in it to begin with, right? So if you are willing to do that, that can help you keep the drive going and keep the upward tick marks, the upward stairs stepping of the graph. You can keep
Yep.
all of that moving forward, but you have to be willing to seek out outside information, consume some things, take the breaks, disconnect. Like, you got to give yourself the headspace in order to have that creativity come out again.
Exactly.
Is that kind of what you were getting at? That's the way I saw it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. One last thing I want to touch on here. Maybe you picked up on this, maybe not. Page 367, there's a quote from Warren Buffett about reading, which we would be derelict in our bookworm duties if we did not touch on this.
We always grab these and hold on to them, right?
Yep. So Warren Buffett said, read 500 pages like this every day. That's how knowledge works. It builds up like compound interest. All of you can do it, but I guarantee not many of you will do it. And this was challenging. I mean, we read a lot of books, right? But I read this, and one of my action items is actually to read more.
Yep.
Because
the very bottom of
he's
my list
talking
here, it
about,
says read more.
yeah, it's basically syntopical reading, right? But on a larger scale. And when I heard Warren Buffett talk about this, I was like, yeah, I need more dots. I feel like I've been collecting them, but I could do more.
Yeah, I wrote this one down as well, and it's exactly the same. Read more books is what I wrote down. And I don't know when or how that's going to happen given my life right now, but I want to at least make an effort towards it. So I don't know what the answer is quite yet, but by next time I want to get that answered.
Right.
But at the same time, like, I mean, we read a lot, right? And when you read a 380 page book in 2 weeks, that's not small in what we're doing. So knowing that and knowing the volume of reading that we do purely for the show, And knowing that we want to both take on more than that, my challenge to you, dear listener, is to do half of that. See if you can read it. Like I would maybe we should do like a monthly or a quarterly challenge of sorts to have like a book club sort of thing where you got to read a book that we pick in a month. Like it's not reading it in 2 weeks. Like we'll let you know 4 weeks ahead of time, and you can read it in a month, and we'll cover it together. I don't know what that is. I feel like we should do something like that. You need to read more.
I need to read more. All right, have we done it? Have we worked through this giant tome of
we
the messy middle?
we have picked out some high peaks to cover, yes, from this thing. Yes.
All right. So, do you have any action items?
Well, you gave it to me, so yes, you're at fault.
All right.
But you have to go first.
Okay, fine. So, I have 2 action items. One is to read more books, as mentioned. And then there's another part from the final mile here where he says you're either part of the living or the dying. And the action item that I wrote down here was get busy living. And I feel like I kind of do this already, but I do want to take an approach to my daily routine, like my ideal week, the things that I do on a regular basis, and reconsider again why the stuff that I do is on there. And maybe make some adjustments. Maybe just clarify that yeah, these are the right things and infuse a little bit more motivation into them. I kind of do this every quarter as part of my personal retreat stuff anyways, but I want to put everything under the microscope again. There's a related thing to this, which maybe we should cover this at some point. 30 Lessons for Living. I've mentioned this as a gap book. Really, really great book by a doctor who went and interviewed a lot of people in nursing homes who you go into a nursing home and there's a lot of people who don't want to be there. There's usually a few people who are just loving life, living their best life. You know, they're really social, just having a great time. And those are the people that he interviewed, thousands of those types of people. And what are the things that got you to the point at this point in your life where you can look back with no regrets and able to enjoy however much time you've got left. And they broke it down into like 30 different themes, 30 different lessons, how to live your best life, basically, from people who have done a good job of it. So that is kind of in the back of my mind as I'm thinking about that too. But yeah, I just want to think about all the things that I'm doing now. And if there's anything that I just feel like I'm obligated to do and I don't really want to do, or not that I'm don't enjoy doing, but things that I recognize not everything is going to be fun. I recognize that there's some stuff that's worth doing that's not going to be easy or enjoyable. And that's not what I'm talking about with this, but the stuff that really just I'm doing it because someone expects me to do it. I really see no value in doing it for myself, like looking for that type of stuff to stop doing.
I feel like that's a tough one. I'm trying to think of like what that would be in my own life. Like what would that equate to? And that's why do you make me think these things? I had it figured out, Mike. Now you got me like processing.
I'm sorry.
Guess what I'm doing on my walk tonight? Okay. All right, so I have 3, 2 of which I had ahead of time, one of which Mike decided to add to my list. And
you're welcome.
The first one that I had wrote down was to because as I was going through this, I've been processing a lot of like my own personal online business and how I do things, thus a lot of the changes I've been in the middle of lately. And one of the things that I'm wanting to do, and it kind of coincides with an off Bookworm task that Mike and I are working towards, but I want to write out a formal plan for what I'm doing with my online business, which incorporates like some of what I'm doing is like the story brand thing for it as well as a like a piece of that. So I feel like I need a little bit of accountability with all of that. Otherwise I'll put it on the back burner and just go, which is unhelpful in this case. So I want to put that on the table as something to work through. I had the one of reading more, because reading more, readers lead and leaders read. Is that how that goes? And the more that I feel like I can consume from a long form stance, I feel like the better synthesis I would have on topics just in general. But this is, preaching to the choir here. So I don't have to explain that one too much. And then we have the one that Mike decided to give me, which is writing out my plan for the day. What am I doing? Like, what's the format of this? Does it matter? Am I doing this hourly, minutely? What am I doing? We didn't explain that part.
I would say hourly.
Hourly. So
Yep.
decide hours before they happen. Is that the concept?
Yep. Time block your day, basically.
Is this the 24-hour thing, or is this my work day? What am I? How deep do I have to go here?
I don't know. I was gonna say just the work day, but maybe you should do
Oh, curses! I should have kept my mouth shut.
maybe you should do every waking hour.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
So,
Hey, just so I have the record here,
oh no,
I got read more and writing out the plan for the day. What was the other one?
the writing out a plan for my online business.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yep. All right. So, plan for the day, all waking hours. Curses. All right.
Sorry. Maybe you'll thank me after you do it. Hopefully.
We'll see. We'll see.
All
I'm
right.
either going to be really excited or rather upset with you.
Right.
We'll see how it goes. There you go. That's what I got.
All right. Style and rating. Guess this is my book, so I have to go first.
Yes.
The style of this book is awesome. I love these small chapters, the quick hit things. I've talked a lot about the way that Scott writes and the way that he communicates these ideas, and I think it's very, very effective. There are not a whole lot of pictures in this book. There's the one visual which he kind of builds on that as he gets through the different sections. So I feel like that's really powerful as a model, but there's not a whole lot else visually to this. I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing. I think going into it, there's a very strong vibe of Silicon Valley startup sort of a thing, which maybe will put some people off. But I feel like there is so much gold in this book for anybody who listens to Bookworm, to be honest. So I would definitely recommend this to people. I would not buy it and give it to somebody and say, here, read this, except for the person that I already did that for. It's hard to rate this on the heels of Viktor Frankl. On one hand, this is talking about work specifically, and so it feels like it should be a level below what we just read in Yes to Life. And I do think that is an accurate perspective to take when considering the subject matter, especially some of the stuff that he shares in here about you are not your job and things like that. It's kind of like chill, you know.
Yeah.
Work isn't everything, which when you consider the audience, these are the people who struggle with this the most. So very reassuring to hear him say that. There's a lot of really cool personal stories, a lot of really cool insights, a lot of really cool famous people that he's met, and like, this is what they told me, and I didn't even realize the value of what they told me till years later when something else happened. So I feel like there's a high level of transparency that comes through in this book. It's somebody who has done something awesome and sold their startup to Adobe for $150 million. So they've lived the dream, right? They've worked all the way through this. And basically he's saying, these are all the mistakes that I've made along the way. So it feels very approachable. I don't feel like you need to have a business background in order to get something out of this. There's something here even for the creatives, which I would argue everybody is creative. So definitely would recommend it. I would recommend pretty much anybody in the Bookworm audience take a look at it, see if you enjoy it. I do think there's a possibility that this just is not the thing for you, and feel free to put it down at that point. Don't force yourself to go through all 380 pages. It was definitely the right thing for me at the right time. I really enjoyed going through this. I'm really glad that we read it. I feel like this is one of those foundational books, those tentpole books that I'm going to refer back to for many, many years. And I'm going to rate it at 4.5 stars. Really, really good. Really great information. Not completely life-changing, at least as I sit here today. Maybe several years from now, that will have changed. But I think even if you just picked it up and read a couple of the chapters that stood out to you, you would get something from it.
Okay. I will agree that this is a difficult one to rate after reading Yes to Life with Viktor Frankl. Like it seems weird because the Viktor Frankl books tend to be the ones that we use as the gauge, like almost the bar to shoot for. And I know that that's not completely true. It does deviate from that, but it's something that does come up here on Bookworm quite a bit. So because of that, I think you're spot on with the way that you're approaching this, at least. So with this book, I will say, like, almost every chapter, like we talked about how there's just tons and tons of chapters. They're like 3 to 4 pages long a piece. At a 370 page book, you can do the math on how many chapters there are in this thing. But because of that format, it means that generally what happens is he introduces a topic. He'll tell you a story about it, maybe some derivatives of that story, possibly a second story, and then explain it a little bit for each of those. That's roughly speaking what each of those is like. It's not exact. He doesn't follow that exactly through those. But I find that process is one that is fairly common. It's fairly easy to grasp and easy to understand. And I'm glad that he took that approach here, because there are so many different little subtopics in here. The one thing that's a little weird to me is that the through line between all of them isn't always clear, right? We haven't really talked about that in broad scope. Like, each individual chapter can stand alone for the most part. Not completely, but pretty close. And because of that, it's really easy, I find, to pick it up and jump somewhere in the middle. Was it Tim Ferriss that was trying to do that? Like, each chapter was designed to be a standalone book, almost, was the way it was intended. I don't remember if that was 4 Hour Workweek, 4 Hour Chef, something like that. One of his books, I think he had that process he was trying to do. This isn't intended to be that way, but it almost does work that way. I kind of struggle to see the through path between each of those, but I also am not so sure that that's necessary in the way that this is supposed to be followed. The way that he's got the 3 pieces here of endure, optimize, and the final mile, because of those big overarching headers, I think it's fine. It just was a little weird to me. That said, like, so much of this, I feel like you're absolutely spot on. This hit me at exactly the right time. Very grateful for having gone through this right now, because of some of the stuff I'm trying to do in simplifying a lot of my off hours work that I do. And because of that, this hits me perfect timing wise. So I feel like there's not really been a better time for me to go through this. This is one I've known about for a long time, just haven't had a reason or time to pick it up. So thanks, Mike. Thanks for doing that. As for a rating, I'll join you. I think 4.5, despite some of the question marks I have around it. But I think that's absolutely right. I think there's a lot of super good value that you can get from this, especially if you're somebody who's running a business or is considering it, or you work for some place that, pays you and you do work for them. My guess is you'll see a lot of things in the business that are happening, and that might inform your way of helping guide the business out of those. So I feel like it does have a pretty wide reach, and yet I would be very selective in who I specifically told you should read this. To your point earlier, like, there's a lot here, and to the wrong person, it could give the wrong idea, I think. Like, if I give this to my boss, he'd be like, wait, hold up. Why do you think we're in all sorts of problems? You don't think we're past all of this? Like, that would probably be the perspective he would get. And that's fine. Just different. So I would be aware of that.
All right. Let's put the messy middle on the shelf. What's next, Joe?
Next is Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon. I think I got tired of Mike telling me about this and then me not having read it. So here we are. I feel like it's time we read this. Might get to reread it for the 17,000th time, I'm sure. So I'm excited about this one. It'll be good. Have you only read it once, or have you read it more than that?
I think I've read it
Okay.
twice, but it's not something that I read every weekend like you make it sound.
So that might have been a slight exaggeration. So yeah,
Yeah,
steal
that'll be
like
a
an
fun one.
artist. And then what, Mike? What are you gonna put on us after that?
I've I wrestled with this prior to the show. I have a big stack of books that I want to read, but the one that I think would be great for Bookworm, even though it is now the third Joshua Becker book that we'll have covered, is Things That Matter. I have heard from people that this is the book that Joshua Becker was meant to write. And so I want to unpack this. I feel like this is either going to resonate with us completely or at least spur a lot of crazy conversation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I hear
All
you.
right.
I think that'll be good. I really do. So since we're both gonna read more, what's your gap book, Mike?
I've got one right over here called Digital Zettelkasten by David Kadavi. I don't know how to spell these or pronounce these last names. It's a short book. It's like 70 some pages. And as you know, I am big into Obsidian. Ding. So I feel like this will be an interesting quick read. And I need a quick read after this one.
Yeah. That was part of the discussion when we chose and decided to do the messy middle. It's like, okay, the one before it thankfully was a little short. The one after it thankfully was a little short, so we can do that. But here we are deciding to read more. I'm going to do a gap book. I just don't know what it is yet. Do you have a recommendation? I've not really done that on the show before. If you had to
Second
pick a book.
edition of How to Take Smart Notes.
Oh, come on. You can't be that
I'm
mean.
just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Though I feel like we're probably
Uh
going to end up doing that at some point.
yeah. Off the top of my head, I don't know. Let me think about it.
Okay. You got
I'll
a
pick
week.
something for you.
Got a week. Because I'll get through Steal Like an Artist in a week now. If I follow the plan, right? And then I'll have a week
Yep.
to do
Yep.
whatever's next. Yeah. So I got a week to find it. I don't know what it is.
Yep.
I'll tell you what it was when we record next. There you go.
All right. So we have follow up next time, unlike this time.
I know, right?
Cool. So thank you to everyone for listening all the way to the end. Thank you to the people who have joined us live on YouTube. You can do that at youtube.com/bookwormfm. Joe always tweets out the recording times ahead of time and some cool conversation that happens occasionally there. We see it all and it influences the discussion. We don't always respond to it directly, but for anyone typing in that chat who's wondering, yes, we do see all that stuff. So thank you for chiming in. Thank you specifically to the Bookworm Club premium members who are willing to not just download the show and give us your attention, which we definitely appreciate that, but people who are willing to support the show financially. You people are awesome. If you want to become a premium club member, you can go to bookworm.fm/membership. $5 a month, $50 a year, what you get for that in addition to our undying gratitude and the knowledge that you're helping keep the lights on here is all the book or all the mind map files that I put together for the books that we read, PDFs and editable mind node files themselves, a couple of gap book episodes, Bookworm 4K wallpaper. But the big thing is that you are a huge part of making this continue. So thank you to everyone who is willing to buy Joe and I a cup of coffee once a month.
Absolutely. And if you are one of those amazing people who has been reading along with us, as all of you should be, pick up Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, and we'll cover that one in a couple of weeks. Good job, sir.
All right, CF Audio Hijack. Hey, it's still running. How about that?
Thanks, Steven. Sorry for the blip in the middle with the stream.
Yeah. Live show is live.
Yeah, basically, it tried to send too much data, and I don't know why.
Mm.
It wasn't really I mean, it was having
We were
problems network.
dropping so many knowledge bombs that the internet couldn't keep up.
I normally try to send somewhere around 5.5 to 6 meg per second. And when I looked over, it was red, and I went and looked at it, and it was trying to send 9 to 9.5, which networking wise gets to be about a bit of a challenge. I mean, technically it can get it done, and it was okay, but it was overwhelming it. So I don't know what that was. I backed it off by half a meg, and then it settled down and didn't have an issue. So weird. Don't know what that was. Computers. Sometimes they work, sometimes they do not.
Indeed. All right. I'm going to have to run here quickly.
Okay.
So thank you to everybody for joining us. Catch you next time.
All right. See you, team.